The following account has been reconstructed from medical records discovered in the abandoned basement of St. Bartholomew's Hospital in Duluth, Minnesota, following the institution's demolition in 1952. These documents, preserved in a sealed metal cabinet bearing the hospital's original seal, chronicle events that transpired during the winter of 1907, when the medical establishment encountered a case that challenged fundamental understanding of human physiology. The papers include detailed patient charts, correspondence between physicians, nursing logs, and official reports submitted to the Minnesota State Board of Health, all documenting phenomena that defied contemporary medical knowledge. Dr. Cornelius Whitman, chief physician at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, maintained meticulous records throughout his 30-year career, though his documentation from early 1907 reveals a marked departure from standard medical notation. His handwriting, typically precise and clinical, becomes increasingly erratic as he attempts to describe observations that contradicted everything he had learned during his medical training at Johns Hopkins University. The physician's notes suggest a man struggling to reconcile scientific methodology with experiences that existed beyond the boundaries of established medical understanding. St. Bartholomew's Hospital served the growing industrial community of Duluth during an era when medical science was rapidly advancing, yet still grappled with mysteries of human physiology that would not be fully understood for decades to come. The institution, constructed in 1889 from locally quarried stone, housed 42 beds and employed a staff of 12 physicians, 26 nurses, and various support personnel. The hospital's reputation for progressive medical practices attracted patients from throughout the upper Midwest, though this distinction would be forever altered by the events of 1907. The case that would challenge the hospital's medical staff began on January 15th, 1907, when a patient identified only as J. Morrison was admitted following what witnesses described as a severe industrial accident at the Duluth Iron Works. The patient, a man of approximately 35 years, had reportedly been struck by a massive piece of machinery that should have resulted in immediate death. However, despite sustaining injuries that appeared incompatible with survival, the patient remained conscious and responsive, though medical examination revealed the complete absence of detectable cardiac activity. Dr. Whitman's initial examination notes, written in his characteristic clinical style, document his systematic attempts to locate evidence of cardiac function using all available diagnostic methods of the era. The physician employed multiple stethoscopes, manual palpation of pulse points, and visual observation of chest movement, yet consistently failed to detect any indication that the patient's heart was functioning. Despite this apparent cardiac arrest, J. Morrison remained alert, responsive to verbal commands, and capable of normal conversation, creating a medical paradox that defied rational explanation. The hospital's nursing staff, led by head nurse Margaret Sullivan, documented their own observations of the patient's impossible condition through detailed hourly logs that reveal growing unease among the medical personnel. Nurse Sullivan, a woman of considerable experience who had witnessed numerous medical emergencies during her 15-year career, found herself unable to explain how a patient could maintain consciousness and cognitive function without detectable cardiac activity. Her notes describe attempts to monitor the patient's condition using conventional methods, all of which confirmed the absence of heartbeat while simultaneously documenting normal respiratory function and mental clarity. Dr. Whitman's correspondence with colleagues at other medical institutions reveals his desperate search for precedent or explanation for J. Morrison's condition. His letters to physicians in Minneapolis, Chicago, and New York describe the case in carefully measured terms, seeking consultation while avoiding claims that might damage his professional reputation. The responses, preserved among the hospital's archived correspondence, uniformly express skepticism regarding the reported observations. with several colleagues suggesting that diagnostic error must account for the apparent impossibility of the patient's survival. The patient's own statements, recorded by hospital staff during the initial examination period, provide insight into his subjective experience of existing without cardiac function. J. Morrison reported feeling different following his accident, describing sensations that he characterized as emptiness within my chest and a silence where sound should be. However, he expressed no distress regarding his condition and appeared genuinely puzzled by the medical staff's concern about his apparent lack of heartbeat, suggesting that his subjective experience did not align with the objective medical observations. As word of the unusual case spread throughout the hospital, staff members began to exhibit signs of nervous tension that affected the institution's normal operations. Dr. Whitman's administrative notes document increased absenteeism among nursing staff, requests for transfer to other departments, and a general atmosphere of unease that seemed to center around the patient's room. The physician found himself struggling to maintain normal hospital routines while grappling with a case that challenged the fundamental principles upon which modern medicine was based. The hospital's medical library became the site of intensive research as Dr. Whitman and his colleagues searched historical and contemporary literature for any reference to similar cases. Their investigation revealed scattered accounts of individuals who had reportedly survived without detectable cardiac function. Though these reports were typically dismissed as folklore or misdiagnosis rather than legitimate medical phenomena, the absence of credible precedent left the medical staff without guidance for treating a patient whose very existence seemed to violate the laws of human physiology, setting the stage for the increasingly disturbing events that would unfold during the following weeks. Dr. Whitman's medical journal from late January 1907 reveals the profound challenge posed by J. Morrison's continued survival despite the complete absence of cardiac function. The physician's training compelled him to seek rational explanations for phenomena that appeared to transcend medical understanding. Yet his systematic examination of the patient yielded increasingly puzzling results. Each diagnostic procedure confirmed the same impossible conclusion. The patient maintained full consciousness, normal respiratory function, and appropriate cognitive responses while exhibiting no detectable heartbeat through any available method of cardiac assessment. The hospital's consultation with Dr. Edmund Hayes, a renowned cardiologist from the University of Minnesota Medical School, provided no resolution to the medical mystery. Dr. Hayes arrived at St. Bartholomew's Hospital on January 28 in 1907, equipped with the most advanced cardiac diagnostic instruments available to contemporary medicine. His examination of J. Morrison, conducted over a period of 6 hours, confirmed Dr. Whitman's observations while adding the authority of specialized expertise to the case documentation. Dr. Hayes's written report, preserved among the hospital archives, acknowledges the impossibility of the patient's condition while affirming the accuracy of the diagnostic findings. The patient's physical appearance during this period remained remarkably normal, despite his lack of cardiac function, though subtle changes began to manifest that concerned the medical staff. Nurse Sullivan's detailed observations noted a gradual pallor that seemed to affect the patient's complexion, though his skin remained warm to the touch and showed no signs of the cyanosis typically associated with circulatory failure. The patient's eyes, previously described as bright and alert, began to acquire what the nursing staff characterized as an unusual depth that seemed to reflect light in ways that created an unsettling visual effect. Dr. Whitman's attempts to understand the physiological mechanisms sustaining J. Morrison's life led to increasingly sophisticated diagnostic procedures that pushed the boundaries of 1907 medical technology. The physician arranged for consultation with specialists in respiratory medicine, neurology, and experimental physiology, hoping that interdisciplinary collaboration might reveal the secret of the patient's survival. However, Each specialist confirmed the same paradoxical findings: normal function in all measurable systems except for the complete absence of cardiac activity that should have resulted in immediate death. The hospital's medical staff began to document subtle behavioral changes in Jay Morrison that suggested his condition might be affecting more than just his cardiovascular system. The patient's speech patterns, initially normal, gradually acquired what observers described as an unusual cadence that seemed to lack the natural rhythm associated with normal breathing and circulation. His responses to questions, while remaining logically appropriate, began to exhibit a quality that nursing staff found increasingly disturbing, though they struggled to articulate the specific nature of their concerns. Jay Morrison's dietary requirements presented another medical puzzle that challenged conventional understanding of human metabolism. The patient consumed normal quantities of food and water, yet medical observation revealed no evidence of the digestive processes that should have been necessary to sustain life without cardiac circulation. Dr. Whitman's notes document his growing frustration with diagnostic procedures that consistently yielded results incompatible with established medical knowledge, forcing him to question fundamental assumptions about human physiology that had guided his entire professional career. The patient's sleep patterns, monitored continuously by nursing staff, revealed anomalies that added another layer of mystery to his condition. Jay Morrison appeared to enter states resembling normal sleep, yet careful observation suggested that these periods lacked the physiological characteristics typically associated with rest and recovery. Nurses reported that the patient's breathing during these episodes became so shallow as to be nearly undetectable, while his skin temperature dropped to levels that should have indicated serious medical distress. Yet he invariably awakened refreshed and alert. Dr. Whitman's correspondence with medical colleagues during February 1907 reveals his growing isolation within the professional community as word of the case spread throughout medical circles. Several physicians who had initially expressed interest in consulting on the case withdrew their offers of assistance after reviewing the detailed documentation, apparently unwilling to associate their reputations with phenomena that challenged established medical orthodoxy. The physician found himself increasingly alone in his attempts to understand and treat a patient whose very existence seemed to mock the scientific principles upon which modern medicine was founded. The hospital's administration, led by Director Samuel Morrison, began to express concern about the impact of the unusual case on the institution's reputation and operations. Administrative records from this period document discussions about the advisability of transferring Jay Morrison to a research facility better equipped to handle cases that fell outside normal medical parameters. However, the patient's apparent stability and the absence of any institution willing to accept responsibility for such an unprecedented case resulted in the decision to continue treatment at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, despite the growing unease among staff and administration. As February progressed, Dr. Whitman's medical notes reveal his growing conviction that Jay Morrison's condition represented something beyond the scope of conventional medical understanding. The physician's rational mind continued to seek scientific explanations, yet his detailed observations documented phenomena that seemed to exist in defiance of natural law. His journal entries from this period reflect the struggle of a dedicated medical professional confronting evidence that challenged not only his training, but his fundamental understanding of the nature of life itself, setting the stage for even more disturbing developments that would soon test the limits of human comprehension. Head nurse Margaret Sullivan's detailed logs from February and March 1907 provide the most comprehensive documentation of Jay Morrison's day-to-day existence within St. Bartholomew's Hospital, revealing subtle changes in the patient's condition that escaped the attention of physicians focused on major physiological systems. Her nursing background, emphasizing careful observation of patient behavior and comfort, positioned her to notice anomalies that medical examinations failed to detect. Nurse Sullivan's records describe a gradual transformation in the patient's demeanor that suggested his impossible survival was exacting a psychological toll that manifested in increasingly disturbing ways. The nursing staff's initial attempts to provide standard patient care revealed the practical challenges of treating someone whose physiological condition defied medical understanding. Routine procedures such as monitoring vital signs became exercises in futility, as conventional instruments consistently failed to detect cardiac activity while other vital functions appeared normal. Nurse Sullivan's notes document the staff's growing frustration with their inability to assess the patient's medical status using established protocols, forcing them to develop alternative methods of monitoring his condition based on subjective observation rather than objective measurement. During the third week of February, nursing staff began to report incidents that suggested J. Morrison's presence was affecting the hospital environment in ways that extended beyond his immediate medical condition. Several nurses documented experiences of feeling unusually cold when entering the patient's room, despite normal temperature readings on thermometers placed throughout the chamber. These reports, initially dismissed as psychological responses to the unusual case, became more frequent and consistent as different staff members independently described similar sensations during their shifts. Nurse Sullivan's detailed observations of the patient's interaction with other hospital staff revealed subtle behavioral patterns that caused increasing concern among the nursing team. J. Morrison's conversations, while remaining coherent and appropriate, began to exhibit what the head nurse characterized as a quality of detachment that seemed to suggest he was observing rather than participating in human interaction. The patient's responses to questions about his condition or comfort consistently indicated satisfaction with his situation. Yet his manner of speaking suggested a fundamental disconnection from normal human experience. The patient's effect on other patients within the hospital became a source of growing concern as reports accumulated of individuals requesting room transfers to avoid proximity to J. Morrison's quarters. Nursing logs document several incidents of patients experiencing nightmares, difficulty sleeping, and general anxiety that seemed to correlate with their location relative to the patient's room. These psychological effects appeared to affect individuals regardless of their knowledge of J. Morrison's unusual condition, suggesting that his presence created an atmosphere of unease that operated below the level of conscious awareness. Nurse Sullivan's records from early March describe her growing conviction that J. Morrison's survival without cardiac function was somehow altering his fundamental nature in ways that conventional medical observation could not adequately assess. Her notes document subtle changes in the patient's physical appearance that occurred too gradually for daily medical examinations to detect, including what she described as a progressive loss of the vital essence that distinguishes living beings from mere animated matter. The head nurse's nursing experience provided her with an intuitive understanding of patient wellness that transcended measurable vital signs. The nursing staff's attempts to maintain normal patient care routines became increasingly difficult as J. Morrison's condition continued to defy medical explanation. Routine activities such as bathing, feeding, and medication administration revealed anomalies that suggested the patient's body was functioning according to principles that differed from normal human physiology. Nurse Sullivan documented instances where the patient's skin failed to respond to temperature changes in expected ways, where medications seemed to have no discernible effect, and where normal healing processes appeared to be suspended or altered. During the second week of March, nursing observations revealed changes in J.D. Morrison's sleep patterns that caused considerable alarm among the hospital staff. The patient's periods of rest, previously resembling normal sleep despite the absence of cardiac function, began to exhibit characteristics that nurses found deeply disturbing. Nurse Sullivan's logs describe episodes where the patient appeared to enter states of complete stillness that resembled death more than sleep. Yet he invariably returned to consciousness with no apparent ill effects from these periods of apparent suspended animation. The hospital's night shift nurses reported the most disturbing observations, documenting incidents that occurred during evening hours when the hospital's normal activity was reduced. Several nurses independently reported hearing sounds emanating from J. Morrison's room that had no apparent source, including what they described as whispered conversations, conducted in voices that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. These reports, initially attributed to the psychological strain of caring for such an unusual patient, became more frequent and detailed as multiple staff members corroborated similar experiences. Nurse Sullivan's final entries regarding J. Morrison, written during the third week of March 1907, reveal her growing conviction that the patient's continued survival was somehow dependent upon forces that existed beyond the scope of medical understanding. Her professional experience had taught her to recognize the signs of approaching death, yet J. Morrison exhibited none of these indicators despite his lack of cardiac function. The head nurse's observations suggested that whatever was sustaining the patient's life operated according to principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of human existence, preparing the way for the even more disturbing revelations that would soon emerge from the hospital's medical staff. The transcribed interviews conducted with J. Morrison during March 1907, preserved among Dr. Whitman's personal papers, provide unique insight into the subjective experience of existing without cardiac function. These conversations, recorded by hospital stenographer Miss Emily Richardson, reveal a patient whose mental faculties remained intact despite his impossible physiological condition, yet whose descriptions of his internal experience suggested fundamental changes in his relationship to normal human existence. The patient's testimony, delivered in calm, measured tones, describes sensations and perceptions that challenge the interviewing physician's understanding of consciousness and life itself. J. Morrison's account of the accident that precipitated his condition provides few clues regarding the mechanism of his transformation, as his memories of the incident remained fragmentary and confused. The patient described approaching the massive machinery at the Duluth Iron Works on the morning of January 15th, then experiencing what he characterized as a moment of absolute silence, followed by awakening to a world that seemed somehow different in ways I cannot adequately express. His inability to recall the specific details of his accident frustrated medical attempts to understand the cause of his unusual survival. When questioned about his awareness of his lack of heartbeat, J. Morrison displayed a curious combination of acknowledgement and indifference that disturbed his medical attendants. The patient readily agreed that he could not detect his own cardiac function, yet expressed no concern about this absence, describing it as a silence that has replaced a sound I never consciously noticed until it was gone. His matter-of-fact acceptance of his condition suggested either remarkable psychological adaptation or a fundamental alteration in his emotional responses to circumstances that should have caused extreme distress. The patient's descriptions of his physical sensations revealed anomalies that extended beyond the absence of cardiac function to encompass changes in his entire sensory experience. J. Morrison reported that colors appeared more vivid, yet somehow less substantial than before his accident, while sounds seemed to reach him as if traveling through a medium denser than normal air. His accounts of taste and smell suggested similar alterations, with familiar foods and odors acquiring qualities that he struggled to articulate using conventional language. J. Morrison's testimony regarding his sleep experiences provided insight into the unusual rest patterns that had concerned the nursing staff. The patient described entering states that he characterized as a form of rest that involves the cessation of awareness rather than the dreams and partial consciousness of normal sleep. He reported no memory of these periods, yet claimed to emerge from them with a sense of having been elsewhere rather than simply unconscious, suggesting that his rest involved processes fundamentally different from normal human sleep cycles. When questioned about his emotional state and psychological well-being, Morrison's responses revealed changes that were perhaps more disturbing than his physical anomalies. The patient reported a gradual diminishment of emotional intensity, describing feelings of joy, sorrow, fear, and anger as distant echoes of sensations that once seemed immediate and compelling. His detached manner of discussing these changes suggested that even his capacity for concern about his own condition had been affected by whatever process was sustaining his impossible survival. The patient's observations about his interaction with hospital staff provided a unique perspective on the psychological impact of his presence on others. Morrison noted that people seemed uncomfortable in his vicinity, though he claimed to feel no different toward them than he had before his accident. His descriptions of conversations with nurses and physicians revealed an awareness that his condition was causing distress among the hospital community. Yet he expressed this knowledge with the same emotional detachment that characterized all his responses to circumstances that should have provoked strong reactions. Morrison's testimony regarding his future expectations revealed perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his psychological state. When asked about his plans for recovery and return to normal life, the patient expressed uncertainty about whether such concepts remained applicable to his situation. He described feeling suspended between states of being and questioned whether his current existence represented a temporary condition or a permanent transformation into something that could no longer be classified as entirely human. The patient's philosophical reflections on his condition, recorded during extended interviews in late March, demonstrated that his intellectual capabilities remained unimpaired despite the profound changes in his physiological and emotional state. Morrison speculated about the nature of life and death, suggesting that his experience had provided him with perspectives that challenged conventional understanding of these fundamental concepts. His calm discussion of such weighty matters, delivered without apparent emotional investment, created an unsettling impression on his medical attendants. The final recorded interview with Morrison, conducted on March 28, 1907, captured the patient's growing awareness that his condition was causing significant concern among the hospital staff and administration. He expressed understanding of their dilemma while maintaining his characteristic emotional detachment, noting that his presence seemed to create difficulties that extended beyond medical treatment to encompass questions about the nature of existence itself. The patient's acknowledgement of these broader implications, delivered with the same calm indifference that marked all his statements, suggested that whatever was sustaining his life had fundamentally altered his relationship to human concerns and emotions, preparing the way for the dramatic developments that would soon force the hospital to confront the true nature of the mystery they harbored within their walls. The arrival of Dr. Theodore Blackwood from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, on April 2, 1907, represented the medical establishment's most serious attempt to understand Morrison's impossible condition through scientific investigation. Dr. Blackwood, renowned for his pioneering work in experimental physiology and his willingness to challenge conventional medical assumptions, brought with him advanced diagnostic equipment and a team of specialists equipped to conduct the most comprehensive examination possible given the limitations of contemporary medical technology. His detailed report, filed with the Minnesota State Medical Board, provides the most thorough documentation of the physiological anomalies that defied rational explanation. Dr. Blackwood's initial examination of J. Morrison, conducted over a period of 8 hours on April 3rd, confirmed all previous medical observations while adding new layers of complexity to the case. The specialist's use of experimental cardiac monitoring devices, including a prototype electrocardiograph recently developed at Johns Hopkins University, failed to detect any electrical activity from the patient's heart, despite the instrument's demonstrated sensitivity to the faintest cardiac impulses. The complete absence of electrical activity, combined with the patient's obvious survival, created a medical paradox that challenged fundamental understanding of cardiac physiology. The comprehensive blood analysis ordered by Dr. Blackwood revealed anomalies that extended the mystery beyond simple cardiac dysfunction to encompass systemic changes throughout J. Morrison's physiology. Laboratory results indicated blood chemistry values that should have been incompatible with life, including oxygen saturation levels that defied explanation given the apparent absence of cardiac circulation. The patient's blood appeared to maintain its vital properties through mechanisms that operated independently of normal cardiovascular function, suggesting that his survival depended upon processes unknown to contemporary medical science. Dr. Blackwood's neurological examination of the patient yielded results that were perhaps more disturbing than the cardiac anomalies, revealing changes in brain function that seemed to correlate with Jane Morrison's altered emotional and psychological state. The specialist's tests indicated unusual patterns of neural activity that differed significantly from normal brain function, yet the patient maintained full cognitive abilities and rational thought processes. These findings suggested that whatever was sustaining the patient's life was also modifying his neurological function in ways that affected his fundamental relationship to human experience. The respiratory analysis conducted by Dr. Blackwood's team provided additional evidence that J. Morrison's survival operated according to principles that transcended normal physiological understanding. Despite maintaining apparently normal breathing patterns, detailed measurement revealed that the patient's oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide production occurred at levels that should have been insufficient to sustain consciousness. The efficiency of his respiratory system seemed to have been enhanced beyond normal human parameters, suggesting metabolic processes that functioned according to unknown biological principles. Dr. Blackwood's consultation with colleagues at medical institutions throughout the United States and Europe revealed the unprecedented nature of J. Morrison's condition within the documented history of medical science. Extensive correspondence with physicians, researchers, and medical libraries failed to uncover any credible reports of similar cases, leaving the medical team without precedent or guidance for understanding the patient's survival. The absence of comparable cases suggested that J. Morrison's condition represented either an entirely unique phenomenon or an occurrence so rare that it had never been properly documented by medical authorities. The psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Blackwood's team revealed the extent to which J. Morrison's mental state had been affected by his physiological transformation. Detailed testing indicated that while the patient's intellectual capabilities remained intact, his emotional responses and psychological reactions had been fundamentally altered. The evaluation suggested that whatever process was sustaining his physical survival was simultaneously modifying his psychological relationship to human experience, creating a form of existence that could no longer be classified as entirely normal. Dr. Blackwood's attempts to understand the mechanism of J. Morrison's survival led to increasingly sophisticated theoretical speculation about the nature of life itself. The physician's private notes, discovered among his papers following his death in 1943, reveal his growing conviction that the patient's condition represented evidence of vital forces that operated beyond the scope of contemporary scientific understanding. Dr. Blackwood's theoretical framework suggested that life might depend upon principles that transcended purely mechanical or chemical processes, opening possibilities that challenged the materialistic assumptions underlying modern medical practice. The specialist's recommendation for continued observation and study of J. Morrison reflected both scientific curiosity and growing concern about the implications of the case for medical understanding. Dr. Blackwood's report to the Minnesota State Medical Board acknowledged that the patient's condition raised questions that extended beyond individual treatment to encompass fundamental assumptions about the nature of human life and death. His recommendation that the case be studied by a multidisciplinary team of researchers reflected recognition that J. Morrison's survival might require investigation by experts in fields beyond conventional medicine. Dr. Blackwood's final assessment of the case, completed before his departure from St. Bartholomew's Hospital on April 15, 1907, provided a sobering evaluation of the medical establishment's ability to understand or treat J. Morrison's condition. The specialist's conclusion that the patient's survival operated according to principles unknown to contemporary science represented a significant admission of medical limitation by one of the era's most respected physicians. His recommendation that the hospital continue providing supportive care while avoiding interventions that might disrupt whatever process was sustaining the patient's life reflected both scientific humility and growing apprehension about the true nature of the forces they were observing, setting the stage for the increasingly disturbing developments that would soon test the hospital staff's ability to cope with phenomena beyond their comprehension. The weeks following Dr. Blackwood's consultation marked a period of increasing tension within St. Bartholomew's Hospital as the implications of J. Morrison's impossible survival began to affect the institution's normal operations. Staff members reported growing difficulty concentrating on routine duties, while the patient's presence seemed to create an atmosphere of unease that permeated even areas of the hospital distant from his room. Dr. Whitman's administrative notes document a marked increase in requests for transfers, resignations, and sick leave among personnel who had previously demonstrated unwavering dedication to their professional responsibilities. The hospital's other patients began to exhibit symptoms that suggested J. Morrison's presence was affecting individuals beyond the immediate medical staff. Several patients requested room transfers to locations as far as possible from the patient's quarters, citing difficulty sleeping and general feelings of anxiety that they could not adequately explain. Dr. Whitman's medical notes describe a pattern of nervous disorders among patients who had no direct contact with J.E. Morrison, yet whose symptoms seemed to correlate with their proximity to his room and the duration of their stay within the hospital. Nurse Sullivan's logs from late April document increasingly frequent incidents that suggested the hospital's physical environment was somehow being altered by J. Morrison's continued presence. Multiple staff members reported temperature fluctuations in corridors adjacent to the patient's room, despite normal readings on thermometers and the absence of any mechanical explanation for such variations. These environmental anomalies, initially dismissed as psychological responses to stress, became too frequent and consistent to attribute to imagination or suggestion. The hospital's night shift personnel reported the most disturbing experiences, describing incidents that occurred during evening hours when the institution's normal activity was reduced to essential patient care. Several nurses documented hearing sounds that seemed to emanate from within the building structure itself, including what they characterized as whispered conversations conducted in languages that seemed familiar yet incomprehensible. These auditory phenomena appeared to be centered around J. Morrison's room, yet investigation consistently failed to identify any source for the reported sounds. Dr. Whitman's correspondence with the hospital's board of directors reveals his growing concern about the institution's ability to maintain normal operations while harboring a patient whose very existence challenged medical understanding. The physician's letters describe declining staff morale, increasing difficulty recruiting replacement personnel, and a general atmosphere of apprehension that was beginning to affect the quality of patient care. His requests for guidance from the board regarding the appropriate course of action reflect the unprecedented nature of the situation facing the hospital administration. The hospital's maintenance staff reported mechanical problems that seemed to occur with unusual frequency in areas surrounding J. Morrison's room, despite the recent construction and generally excellent condition of the building systems. Electrical fixtures failed without apparent cause. Plumbing developed leaks that could not be explained by normal wear or installation problems, and heating systems exhibited erratic behavior that defied the efforts of experienced technicians. These mechanical failures, while individually minor, created a pattern of dysfunction that added to the general atmosphere of unease within the hospital. J. Morrison's continued stability, rather than providing reassurance to the hospital staff, seemed to intensify their psychological distress as the impossibility of his survival became increasingly apparent with each passing day. The patient's calm acceptance of his condition and his apparent indifference to the concern he was causing among the medical staff created an additional source of anxiety for personnel who found his emotional detachment more disturbing than overt signs of distress would have been. His presence served as a constant reminder that the hospital was harboring something that existed beyond the boundaries of normal human experience. The hospital's medical library became the site of intensive research as staff members searched for any precedent or explanation for the phenomena they were observing. Dr. Whitman and his colleagues consulted historical medical texts, contemporary research papers, and even folklore and religious literature in their desperate search for understanding. Their investigation revealed scattered references to individuals who had reportedly survived impossible injuries or exhibited supernatural characteristics, though these accounts were typically dismissed as superstition rather than legitimate medical documentation. The psychological impact on the hospital's medical staff became increasingly evident as April progressed, with several physicians requesting consultation with colleagues at other institutions regarding their own mental health. Dr. Whitman's private journal reveals his growing concern about his ability to maintain professional objectivity while confronting phenomena that challenged his fundamental understanding of medical science. His entries describe sleepless nights spent questioning not only J. Morrison's condition, but his own perceptions and professional competence. As the month of April drew to a close, the hospital's administration faced the increasingly urgent question of what to do with a patient whose presence was threatening the institution's ability to function effectively. The board of directors, meeting minutes from April 28, 1907, document discussions about the possibility of transferring J. Morrison to a research facility or specialized institution better equipped to handle cases that fell outside normal medical parameters. However, the absence of any institution willing to accept responsibility for such an unprecedented case, combined with ethical concerns about abandoning a patient in need of care, left the hospital with no clear course of action. The administration's growing recognition that they were confronting forces beyond their understanding or control set the stage for the dramatic events that would soon force them to make decisions that would determine not only J. Morrison's fate, but the future of St. Bartholomew's Hospital itself. The decision to conduct one final comprehensive examination of J. Morrison was reached during an emergency meeting of the hospital's medical staff on May 3, 1907, as the institution's administration grappled with the increasingly urgent need to resolve the patient's status. Dr. Whitman supported by the remaining senior physicians who had not requested transfers to other institutions, proposed a systematic investigation that would either provide a rational explanation for the patient's survival or document the case so thoroughly that future medical researchers might understand what the current staff could not comprehend. The examination, scheduled for May 10th, would represent the medical establishment's final attempt to apply scientific methodology to phenomena that seem to exist beyond the scope of rational understanding. The preparation for this ultimate diagnostic procedure involved consultation with specialists from medical institutions throughout the Midwest, as Dr. Whitman assembled the most qualified team available to contemporary medical science. The participating physicians included experts in cardiology, neurology, respiratory medicine, and experimental physiology, each bringing advanced diagnostic equipment and theoretical knowledge to bear upon J. Morrison's impossible condition. Their collective expertise represented the pinnacle of 1907 medical understanding, yet their preliminary discussions revealed the profound challenge of applying conventional diagnostic methods to a patient whose very existence defied established physiological principles. J. Morrison's response to news of the planned examination demonstrated the same emotional detachment that had characterized his behavior throughout his hospitalization. Yet his statements revealed a subtle awareness that this procedure might represent a turning point in his unusual existence. The patient expressed willingness to cooperate with any diagnostic procedures the medical staff deemed necessary, while noting with characteristic calm that he doubted conventional medical investigation would provide the answers they sought. His matter-of-fact acceptance of the situation, combined with his apparent understanding of its implications, created an unsettling impression on the physicians who would soon attempt to unravel the mystery of his survival. The examination itself, conducted over a period of 12 hours on May 10th, 1907, involved the most sophisticated diagnostic procedures available to contemporary medical science. The assembled team of specialists employed multiple experimental instruments, including advanced electrocardiographic equipment, pneumographic devices for measuring respiratory function, and neurological testing apparatus designed to assess brain activity. Each diagnostic procedure confirmed the same impossible conclusion. J. Morrison maintained full consciousness and apparent health despite the complete absence of detectable cardiac function and the presence of physiological anomalies that should have resulted in immediate death. The most disturbing discovery emerged during the neurological examination, when Dr. Harrison Wells of the University of Minnesota detected brainwave patterns that differed significantly from any previously documented human neural activity. The experimental electroencephalographic equipment revealed electrical patterns that seemed to indicate consciousness operating according to principles unknown to contemporary neuroscience. Dr. Wells's notes describe brain activity that appeared to be synchronized with rhythms that have no apparent source within the patient's nervous system, suggesting that J. Morrison's consciousness might be sustained by influences external to his physical brain. The respiratory analysis conducted during the examination revealed anomalies that extended the mystery beyond simple cardiac dysfunction to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of metabolism itself. Despite maintaining apparently normal breathing patterns, detailed measurement indicated that J. Morrison's oxygen consumption occurred at levels far below those necessary to sustain normal human consciousness. The efficiency of his respiratory system seemed to have been enhanced beyond normal biological parameters, suggesting metabolic processes that operated according to unknown principles of energy, conversion, and utilization. The blood analysis performed during the examination yielded results that challenged fundamental understanding of human physiology and biochemistry. Laboratory tests revealed blood chemistry values that should have been incompatible with life, including cellular structures that appeared to have been modified in ways that contemporary medical science could not explain. The patient's blood maintained its vital properties through mechanisms that seemed to operate independently of normal cardiovascular circulation, suggesting that his survival depended upon processes that transcended conventional biological understanding. As the examination progressed, several of the participating physicians began to report subjective experiences that suggested J. Morrison's presence was affecting their own psychological and physical state. Dr. Wells documented feelings of disorientation and unusual fatigue that seemed to intensify during periods of direct contact with the patient, while other specialists reported similar symptoms that had no apparent medical cause. These effects on the examining physicians added another layer of mystery to a case that was already challenging every assumption about the nature of human existence. The examination's most significant finding emerged during the final phase of testing, when attempts to measure the patient's core body temperature revealed readings that fluctuated in patterns that seemed to correlate with external factors rather than internal physiological processes. J. Morrison's body temperature appeared to respond to influences that had no apparent connection to his physical environment or medical condition, suggesting that his survival might depend upon forces that operated beyond the boundaries of conventional scientific understanding. The final report, compiled by the examining physicians, submitted to the Minnesota State Medical Board on May 15, 1907, represented a collective admission that J. Morrison's condition existed beyond the scope of contemporary medical knowledge. The document, signed by 7 of the era's most respected medical specialists, acknowledged that the patient's survival operated according to principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of life itself. Their recommendation that the case be studied by researchers in fields beyond conventional medicine reflected recognition that J. Morrison's existence might require investigation by experts in areas that had previously been considered outside the realm of serious scientific inquiry, setting the stage for the dramatic conclusion that would soon force the hospital to confront the ultimate implications of harboring a patient whose very presence seemed to challenge the natural order itself. The events of May 20th, 1907, marked the culmination of 4 months during which St. Bartholomew's Hospital had struggled to comprehend and contain phenomena that existed beyond the boundaries of medical understanding. Dr. Whitman's final report, submitted to the Minnesota State Medical Board 3 days later, documents the hospital's ultimate recognition that J. Morrison's continued presence posed risks that transcended individual patient care to encompass questions about the nature of reality itself. The physician's carefully worded account describes the decision to transfer the patient to an undisclosed location where his condition could be studied by researchers better equipped to handle cases that challenged conventional scientific methodology. The morning of May 20th began with routine patient care procedures that had become increasingly difficult to maintain as J. Morrison's presence continued to affect the hospital's environment and personnel. Nurse Sullivan's final log entries describe a building-wide atmosphere of tension that seemed to intensify during the early hours, with multiple staff members reporting feelings of unease that had no apparent medical or psychological cause. The head nurse's professional experience had taught her to recognize signs of impending crisis, yet the nature of the approaching culmination remained beyond her ability to predict or prepare for. J. Morrison's behavior during his final hours at St. Bartholomew's Hospital exhibited subtle changes that suggested his awareness of approaching transition, though his characteristic emotional detachment prevented clear communication of his subjective experience. The patient's statements to nursing staff revealed a growing sense of what he characterized as preparation for departure. though he could not specify whether this departure involved physical relocation or transformation into a different state of existence. His calm acceptance of uncertainty regarding his future reflected the same philosophical detachment that had marked his entire hospitalization. The hospital's administrative staff worked throughout the morning to complete arrangements for J. Morrison's transfer, though the documentation reveals significant ambiguity regarding the destination and nature of the receiving institution. Dr. Whitman's correspondence suggests that the transfer had been arranged through channels that operated outside normal medical administrative procedures, involving authorities whose identity and qualifications remained deliberately obscured. The secrecy surrounding these arrangements reflected recognition that J. Morrison's case had implications that extended beyond conventional medical treatment. As the appointed time for transfer approached, several hospital staff members reported experiencing phenomena that seemed to intensify in correlation with the patient's impending departure. Multiple witnesses described temperature fluctuations, unexplained sounds, and visual disturbances that affected areas throughout the building, suggesting that J. Morrison's presence had created changes in the hospital's environment that would not be easily reversed by his removal. These manifestations appeared to represent a final intensification of the anomalous activity that had plagued the institution throughout the patient's residence. The actual transfer procedure, conducted by individuals whose credentials and institutional affiliation remained undisclosed, occurred with an efficiency that suggested extensive preparation and specialized expertise. Dr. Whitman's notes described the arrival of a team equipped with medical transport equipment that appeared more sophisticated than standard ambulance services, operated by personnel who demonstrated familiarity with cases that fell outside normal medical parameters. Their professional competence in handling J. Morrison's unusual condition suggested experience with similar phenomena, though they provided no information about their background or destination. J. Morrison's departure from St. Bartholomew's Hospital occurred without incident, yet his final statements to the medical staff revealed a perspective on his condition that had evolved during his months of hospitalization. The patient expressed gratitude for the care he had received, while acknowledging that his presence had created difficulties that extended beyond medical treatment to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of existence itself. His recognition of these broader implications, delivered with characteristic emotional detachment, suggested that whatever was sustaining his survival had provided him with insights that transcended normal human understanding. The immediate aftermath of J. Morrison's departure revealed the extent to which his presence had affected St. Bartholomew's Hospital's environment and personnel. Staff members reported a gradual return to normal atmospheric conditions, though several individuals continued to experience psychological effects that required extended recovery periods. The hospital's mechanical systems, which had exhibited erratic behavior throughout the patient's residence, gradually returned to normal operation, suggesting that his presence had indeed been responsible for the unexplained malfunctions that had plagued the institution. Dr. Whitman's final administrative duties included the compilation of a comprehensive case file that would serve as the official record of J. Morrison's hospitalization, though significant portions of this documentation were subsequently classified by authorities whose identity and jurisdiction remained unclear. The physician's personal notes reveal his growing conviction that the case represented evidence of forces that operated beyond the scope of contemporary scientific understanding, challenging fundamental assumptions about the nature of life, death, and human existence that had guided medical practice for centuries. The long-term impact of J. Morrison's case on St. Bartholomew's Hospital became apparent in the months following his departure, as several staff members requested transfers to other institutions, and the hospital's reputation within the medical community was permanently altered by association with phenomena that challenged scientific orthodoxy. Dr. Whitman's career continued for another 2 decades, though his later writings reveal a man whose worldview had been fundamentally changed by his encounter with a patient whose very existence had demonstrated that reality contained mysteries far deeper than medical science was prepared to acknowledge. The case of J. Morrison remained classified within medical archives, its implications too disturbing for public disclosure. Yet, its influence on those who had witnessed the impossible survival of a man without a heartbeat would persist long after the patient himself had vanished into whatever realm had claimed him as its own, leaving behind only questions that challenged the very foundations of human understanding about the nature of life itself. If you liked this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel.